After my husband told his friends our joke marriage would die soon and they cheered, I dropped "Why wait? Let's end it today," and walked out as they went silent. His best friend messaged in panic, leaving me staring at my screen right then whispering, "Say it again." I heard him before I saw him. His voice carried through the half-open sliding door of our friend's patio in Tempe, loud enough that the whole group went quiet just long enough to catch every word. "I doubt this joke of a marriage will survive another year," he said. "She's nowhere near my level." A few of the guys laughed, a couple of those short, sharp laughs men use when they want to signal loyalty more than humor. Someone slapped his back. Another muttered, "Damn, dude," like he was impressed. I stood there in the dark living room, holding the stupid bowl of guacamole I'd just finished making because he asked me to, listening to my husband talk about me like I was a burden he was planning to discard. My hands didn't shake. Everything inside me went strangely still, like my body knew exactly what to do before my mind caught up. I pushed the door open and stepped onto the patio. The laughter cut off hard. He froze when he saw me. My husband, Ethan, looked like a kid caught stealing, except he didn't apologize. He didn't even look embarrassed. He just stared at me like I'd interrupted something he had a right to say. I placed the bowl on the table between us. My voice didn't crack, it didn't rise. It came out so calm it scared me a little. "Why wait a year?" I said. "Let's end it today." Nobody moved. His friends looked at him, waiting for a reaction, but he didn't give them one. His jaw flexed once. He actually looked annoyed, like I was being dramatic, like I should have known he didn't mean it the way it sounded, even though he meant every word. I didn't wait for him to respond. I walked back into the house, grabbed my keys, and left before he could follow. The air outside was thick and hot, even though it was late. Arizona heat clings to you no matter how fast you move. I drove with the windows down, half expecting him to call, half hoping he wouldn't. He didn't. I checked into a cheap extended stay off Baseline Road, the kind with scratchy carpet and a parking lot that always smells faintly like stale beer. It didn't matter. It felt like freedom. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. I almost didn't look, assuming it was Ethan finally realizing what had happened. But the name on the screen made my breath catch. Liam, Ethan's best friend since high school, the same one who laughed the hardest on that patio. I opened the message. "You were right to walk out. There's something you need to know about him. I didn't want to send this, but you deserve the truth before he spins his version of tonight." My heartbeat thudded in my ears. I stared at the message, rereading every word as though something might change between blinks. Another bubble appeared. "If you want proof, I have it, but it's worse than what you heard tonight." I sat back against the headboard, the room suddenly too small, too bright, too quiet. Worse than hearing my husband call our marriage a joke. Worse than him mocking me to the people he valued more than me. Worse than the hollow calm that had carried me out the door. I typed back with hands that weren't as steady as before. "What are you talking about?" The typing dots flashed. Then stopped. Then flashed again. I didn't know if I wanted him to answer. But I knew the next message was going to change everything I thought I understood about the man I'd just left. Liam didn't respond right away, so I set the phone on the bed and just stared at the wall of the motel room, trying to understand how things had gotten this far. It wasn't one moment. It was 100 little ones that stacked on top of each other until the weight finally cracked. When I met Ethan 4 years ago in downtown Phoenix, he was charming in that confident, slightly arrogant way that makes you think maybe he's earned it. He worked in commercial real estate, always talking about big deals, always carrying himself like the room bent around him. Back then, I found it magnetic. I'd grown up watching my mother shrink herself to fit into my father's moods, so a man who laid out his ambition like a blueprint felt refreshing, like he knew where he was going. For the first year, he treated me like I was part of that plan. Dinners at new restaurants, weekend trips, little surprises that made me feel chosen. My friends told me I looked happier than they'd ever seen me. I believed them. But it didn't take long for the edges to show. The first shift was subtle. Him correcting the way I phrased things, telling me I misunderstood him when he was being cold, acting irritated whenever I asked questions about his work. I'd bring up something that hurt my feelings and he'd laugh lightly, like I was being sensitive, like I didn't get what real relationships were like. Then came the comparisons. Not direct, not at first. He would mention a coworker's wife, how polished she looked, how she supported her husband by staying off his back during stressful weeks. I didn't think he meant it as a dig until he repeated it a few times, each sharper than the last. He never raised his voice. He just chipped away at me, one comment at a time. The second big fracture came when I lost my job at the marketing firm. It was sudden, a round of layoffs that blindsided half the department. I came home shaking, embarrassed, on the verge of tears. I told Ethan, hoping for comfort. He gave me a tight smile and said, "Well, maybe this will motivate you to figure out what you actually want to do." Not "I'm sorry." Not "that's awful." Not even "we'll get through it." Just a reminder that I wasn't measuring up. A month later, during a fight, he threw it back at me again. "You weren't even happy there. Don't act like you lost some dream gig." By then, I'd learned not to expect empathy from him, just endurance. The third fracture, the one I ignored the hardest, was how he changed around his friends. With me, he was distant. With them, he performed. He told stories, exaggerated details, acted like the guy who always won. And if I contradicted something or corrected a timeline, he'd give me this look that said, "Don't embarrass me." The guys laughed with him, so I laughed too, even when it felt like he was using me as the punchline. I kept telling myself it was stress, that he'd settle, that marriages went through phases. But there was one night, a barbecue at Liam's place in Chandler, when I heard Ethan say, "She's lucky to have me. If she left tomorrow, she'd fall apart." He didn't know I was behind him. I didn't say anything. I swallowed it like I had swallowed everything else. Now, sitting alone in a motel off baseline, waiting for a message from the man who'd known him longer than anyone, I realized something cold and simple. I hadn't walked away too early. I had walked away years too late. My phone buzzed again. Liam's message finally came through while I was still sitting upright against the motel headboard, legs pulled in tight, like bracing myself would somehow soften whatever hit next. "Before I tell you anything, I need to know you're done protecting him." I stared at those words for a long second because they cut deeper than I expected. Protecting him. That was exactly what I'd been doing, defending his temper, excusing his indifference, covering for the way he used me as a prop around his friends. I'd held up his version of our marriage like it was a fragile structure, and I was afraid the smallest truth would make it collapse. I typed back, "I walked out. I'm not protecting him anymore." He responded almost instantly. "Then meet me tomorrow, somewhere public." My stomach twisted. Public? That wasn't something you said unless the truth carried weight. I barely slept. Morning came too bright through the cheap blinds, and something in me had shifted overnight. The shock from the patio had burned off, replaced by something steadier, colder. I moved slowly, deliberately. Shower, clothes. Coffee from the lobby, even though it tasted like burnt plastic. I felt the edges of myself again, the parts he'd worn down. Liam chose a place in Tempe, a small cafe on Mill Avenue, the kind that's loud enough to drown out private conversations, but not so crowded that you get lost. When I walked in, he was already there, sitting by the window, looking nothing like the cocky guy who had laughed at Ethan's joke the night before. He stood when he saw me. "Thanks for coming." His voice was quiet, careful. We talked, but he didn't say the thing yet. Instead, he asked questions: how long I'd felt unhappy, how long Ethan had been talking down to me. They weren't idle questions. He was mapping something, connecting threads I hadn't realized were even part of the same pattern. Every answer I gave him made his jaw tighten a little more. At one point he said, "You know, you changed a lot these past couple years." I didn't know how to respond. He continued, "Not in a bad way, just you got quieter, smaller." The words stung. Not because they were untrue, but because someone else had noticed. When our coffees were nearly gone, he finally exhaled like he'd reached a decision. "I'm going to tell you everything tomorrow," he said, "but I need to get some things in order first, and I need to make sure Ethan doesn't know I'm talking to you." A flash of fear went through me, not panic, but recognition. If Liam was worried about Ethan finding out, whatever this was, it wasn't petty. It wasn't gossip. It was something with teeth. Walking back to my car, I felt the shift inside me deepen into something sharper. Not rage, clarity. Purpose. For so long, I had floated through the relationship, adjusting myself to whatever Ethan needed me to be. But now, every step felt grounded, deliberate. I went back to the motel and opened my laptop. I started with practical things: financial statements, emails, insurance documents. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but moving through the raw structure of our life gave me control. I found small irregularities I'd ignored before. An unexplained withdrawal, a credit card charge he'd said was for work, but didn't match his usual places. A file on the shared drive marked with a name I didn't recognize. Each discovery tightened the knot inside me, but also strengthened something else. A sense of myself returning, someone who wasn't willing to be dismissed, belittled, or erased. By the time the sun dipped low and cast orange light across the motel room, I realized something. Whatever Liam was preparing to tell me, it wasn't going to break me. It was going to confirm what I already felt rising in my chest. And it was going to give me direction. Liam texted me the next morning with an address in North Phoenix. A park, wide open, early enough that families were just starting to arrive and joggers were making loops around the path. Public like he insisted. Safe, at least on the surface. I spotted him sitting at a picnic table under a shade structure, hands clasped so tightly they looked bloodless. He wasn't a nervous guy. If anything, he'd always been the loudest voice in any room I'd seen him in. But right then, he looked stripped down, tired, braced. I sat across from him. "Okay," I said. "Tell me." He didn't ease into it. He didn't circle around. He didn't even clear his throat. "He's been cheating on you," he said. "For a long time." The air around us thickened instantly. Not because the words were shocking, I think some part of me had been expecting them, but because the truth in his voice landed like something heavy dropped onto concrete. Final, irrefutable. I didn't cry, I didn't gasp, I just asked, "Who?" Liam blinked once. Hard. "That's the part I didn't want to tell you." I felt a faint tremor run beneath my skin. "Say it." He looked away toward the parking lot, jaw working. "It's not just one person," he said. "It's two, and one of them you know." My heartbeat slowed to a heavy, punishing rhythm. "I know," he nodded. "It's someone in our group." For a second, the sounds of the park muted, the distant kids yelling, the dogs barking, the stroller wheels over gravel. Everything tunneled in. "Who?" My voice came out flat, controlled. He hesitated for the first time since we sat down. Then, "Rachel." The name hit like cold steel. Rachel, my friend. The woman who had hugged me at Christmas, who confided about her insecurities, who told me she admired how patient and grounded I was. The one who'd sat across from me during so many double dates, laughing at Ethan's jokes, asking about my job hunt, telling me she was here if I ever needed anything. I felt something inside me calcify. "Since when?" I asked. Liam blew out a breath. "Almost a year. A year. A year of her hugging me, texting me, smiling at me while she slept with my husband behind my back. I could barely process it. And the second person," I forced out. He shook his head. "Not someone you know personally, someone from his office. It's not the point." But it was the point. Not because I cared who she was, but because it confirmed something deeper. Ethan's betrayal wasn't impulsive. It was a pattern, a repeated decision. Liam leaned forward, voice lowering. "I didn't come to you just because he cheated. People screw up. This is worse." Worse. The word expanded in my chest like pressure. "What else?" My voice was barely above a whisper. He ran a hand through his hair, elbows on the table. "He wasn't planning to divorce you in a year. He was planning to ruin you." The world seemed to tilt. "What are you talking about?" "He's been moving money," Liam said. "Separating assets. Making sure certain accounts are only in his name. And he's been telling people, our circle, some coworkers, that you've been unhinged lately, that he's worried you might have a breakdown." My stomach turned. "He's setting a narrative," Liam continued. "That when things fall apart, it's because of you, not him." I stared at him, numb and burning all at once. He wasn't just preparing to leave me. He was preparing to erase me. To bury me under a story he wrote. "And last night," Liam added quietly, "he bragged that when he's done, you won't be able to touch a penny without begging." Those were his words. The betrayal on the patio suddenly felt small compared to the machinery he'd been building behind the scenes. I sat back, pulse steadying into something cold. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage was now ash. And in that ash, something sharp and focused formed. Because now I knew what I was fighting. I drove back to the motel with the windows down even though the heat was brutal, because I needed air. Real air, not the recycled kind that felt like it trapped whatever was happening inside my chest. When I closed the door behind me, the silence settled like dust. Heavy, familiar. But it didn't crush me this time. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the truth unfurl without fighting it. Ethan wasn't careless or cruel in passing. He was intentional, calculated. He'd been building a version of me that didn't exist so he could walk away clean, wealthy, admired. And I had been so focused on surviving the daily cuts that I didn't see the blade he'd been sharpening behind my back. But now I saw it, and I saw the outline of his plan. That meant I could dismantle it. I opened my laptop again and forced myself to look at everything with fresh eyes. I wasn't searching for comfort anymore, I was cataloging evidence. Patterns, leverage. First, the finances. I compared statements side by side, tracing where money had moved, where it had vanished, where he'd quietly rerouted account access. There were transfers to an account I didn't recognize, one he'd opened 6 months ago. The amounts weren't huge, he wasn't stupid, but they were consistent, intentional. Second, the documents, insurance, tax files, email threads. I found a folder he'd mislabeled, probably thinking I'd never look. Inside was a draft of a statement about concerning changes in my wife's behavior. Phrases like emotional volatility, unpredictable episodes, and concerns for her ability to manage finances. He was building a case, preparing to make me look incompetent, unstable, irresponsible. Preparing to make courts, friends, and maybe even my own family see me through his version of reality. The anger didn't come fast. It moved through me slowly, like something heavy thawing, until I felt it in every part of me. I closed my eyes. He thinks I won't fight back. And that was when everything crystallized. Revenge wasn't about screaming or burning my life down. It was about precision, strategy, letting him walk straight into the trap he didn't know he'd built for himself. I started writing a list, cold, methodical. Freeze joint accounts before he drains them. Document everything, texts, statements, screenshots, time-stamped files. Secure legal consultation quietly, discreetly. Tell no one except the one person who already broke ranks, Liam. Find out how deep this goes, especially with Rachel. Her name was a new wound, but I didn't let it take over. Not yet. Pain was a distraction, clarity was what mattered. Still, I kept seeing her face in my mind. Bright smile, warm hugs, the kind of friend who volunteered to come over and help me pack after the layoff. The betrayal wasn't just marital, it was personal. And when personal betrayal cuts that deep, revenge takes on a different temperature. Around dusk, Liam texted again. "You okay?" I typed. "I will be." Then, after a moment, "I need more details." "Everything you know," he responded. "Then meet me tomorrow night, somewhere private. This next part isn't safe to text." My breath tightened. Not safe to text meant whatever was coming wasn't just emotional or financial. It was something else, something bigger. I set the phone down and stared at the wall, thinking about the narrative Ethan had crafted, the lies he'd planted, the future he'd been shaping without me knowing. Then I thought about rewriting that narrative. Not just stopping him, exposing him, making sure every calculated step he'd taken led him into a consequence he couldn't escape. For the first time since leaving the patio, I felt steady. Grounded, dangerous. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was preparation. And tomorrow night, when Liam told me the rest, I knew the direction of my revenge would lock into place. I met Liam the next night in the back lot of an office complex off Rio Salado Parkway, the kind of place that emptied out after 6 and stayed silent until dawn. The only light came from a single flickering street lamp and the glow from Liam's phone as he paced in a tight line, hands on his hips, breath visible in the cooler night air. The moment he saw me, he stopped pacing, but the tension in his shoulders didn't ease. "You sure you want the rest?" he asked. "Yes," my voice didn't waver. "Tell me." He looked at me for a long moment, searching my face like he needed to confirm I wouldn't break. Then he exhaled sharply and sat on the curb. I joined him. "This isn't just about the affairs," he said. "It's not even just about the money. There's something else Ethan's been doing. Something he swore he'd never admit to anyone." A cold ripple went through me. "What?" Liam rubbed his palms against his jeans. "You remember around the time you lost your job? When Ethan suddenly stopped inviting you to certain work events? When he kept telling you he didn't want you dealing with his colleagues?" I nodded slowly. "That's because he'd already started talking to people at his firm about you," Liam said. "Not just hinting that you were unstable, he was telling them he was worried you'd sabotage deals, leak information." "What?" My stomach dropped. "Why would he say that?" Because he was leaking information. And he needed someone to pin it on. The night seemed to tilt around me. I stared at him. Liam, that's no, Ethan may be cruel, but he's not reckless. He'd never risk. He already did, Liam cut in. And he did it more than once. My mouth went dry. How do you know this? He looked away, shame pulling at the edges of his expression. Because I covered for him, twice. My breath hitched. He came to me about a year ago, Liam continued. Said he'd messed up. Said he'd shared confidential information during drinks with a potential client and needed someone to vouch for him. He told me it was harmless, that the deal was already dying. I believed him. I told his boss I'd been there with him and nothing inappropriate happened. I couldn't speak. My pulse hammered against my ribs. But then it happened again, Liam said. And that's when I realized it wasn't a mistake. It was leverage, information he could trade. He swallowed. He got in deep, and instead of stopping, he started preparing a scapegoat. Me. My ears rang. The parking lot dissolved to a tunnel. Liam kept going, voice low and strained. He told me last month that if anything ever blew up, he'd have to make it look like you were the one who interfered. He said he'd been dropping hints at work, so everyone already thought you were insecure about his success. Liam paused. He smiled when he said it. A slow, cold dread climbed up my spine. This is why I came to you, he said. He's not leaving you in a year, he's building the fall right now. And Rachel, he stopped. What about Rachel? I asked, the words barely squeezing out. Liam hesitated. She wasn't just the affair, she helped him. The world stilled. She's been feeding Ethan information from her husband's company, he said. She told Ethan it was just insider gossip, but he turned around and used it. He bragged about it to me like it was some kind of game. Liam's voice tightened. If this comes out, she'll turn on him instantly, and he knows that. Which means he'll throw you under the bus before he ever risks her exposing him. My heartbeat steadied, not from calm, but from something razor-focused. This wasn't infidelity. It wasn't just emotional abuse. It was conspiracy. Manipulation, financial positioning, reputation sabotage. He wasn't planning to leave me. He was planning to destroy me to protect himself. Liam leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You needed to know before he makes his next move. A slow, deliberate breath filled my lungs. I knew now what my revenge required. Not anger, not chaos, something cleaner. Sharper, surgical. Something that would force Ethan to collapse under the weight of his own schemes and expose exactly who he really was. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear. Fear had burned off hours ago. What lingered was something colder, steadier, a kind of slow-turning clarity that made every detail sharper. By morning, I knew what I needed, to hear it from Ethan himself, to understand the engine behind all of this, the affairs, the lies, the financial sabotage, the groundwork he'd laid to bury me beneath a false narrative. So I called him. He answered on the second ring, voice clipped. Where are you? Somewhere you don't control, I said, a beat. You're being dramatic, that word. Dramatic, the word he always used to shrink me, to make my reality sound like a performance. I want to talk, I said. Face to face. He hesitated. Fine, my office, 1 hour. I almost laughed. Of course he chose his turf. His territory. The polished space where he played the role of the confident, respected professional. I agreed anyway, because walking into the lion's den is sometimes the only way to make the lion show his teeth. His office in downtown Phoenix was glass-walled and cold, a monument to how much he loved being seen. When I stepped inside, he didn't stand. He just watched me with that tight, managerial expression he always used when he thought I was being inconvenient. You left, he said. That was impulsive. I heard you, I replied. He didn't flinch. People vent, you shouldn't eavesdrop. He said it so casually that for a moment I saw the whole relationship in a single frame. His comfort, my silence. I know about Rachel, I said. That got him. Not a big reaction, just the faintest hardening around his eyes, but I caught it. Well, he said slowly, I figured Liam would run to you eventually. He always had a weak spot for you. I stiffened. This isn't about Liam, this is about you. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. And what exactly do you think you know? That you've been leaking information, moving money, setting up a story about me being unstable. My voice didn't rise. Preparing to pin your mess on me. For a moment, Ethan didn't speak. Then he smiled, not a warm smile, not even a smug one. A smile that looked like it had been carved from something sharp. You finally figured it out, he said. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Why? I asked. Why go that far? Why do all of this instead of just ending the marriage? He studied me the way someone might study a document, scanning, calculating, deciding what could be exploited. Because, he said, if I left you cleanly, you'd walk away with half of everything I've built. I stared at him. Money, this was about money. No, he said, almost irritated by the simplification. It was about position, reputation. Stability, he leaned forward. I worked too hard to let someone like you dismantle it. Someone like me, I repeated quietly. He didn't blink. You got comfortable. You stopped being useful, emotionally, socially, professionally. I carried us. And when you lost your job, you became a liability. The words were so stark, so devoid of human attachment, that for a moment I felt nothing at all. He continued, voice steady, clinical. A clean divorce would have slowed my trajectory. The accusations, the sympathy people would throw your way, it would have dragged things out. But a divorce where everyone already doubts you, he shrugged. That's efficient. Efficient. He had dismantled me for efficiency. And the affairs, I forced out. His answer was immediate. Diversions and leverage. Rachel's husband is a VP, useful, and she was eager to feel special. His eyes met mine. You should understand that. Something inside me went absolutely still. He wasn't ashamed. He wasn't conflicted. He wasn't even angry. He was proud. He'd done all of this because he believed he was entitled to it. Because he thought I was small enough to crush without consequence. Because he assumed I lived in the shadow of his importance, grateful for whatever scraps of validation he tossed my way. In that moment, hearing the truth from his own mouth, I understood something with crystalline certainty. He didn't just underestimate me. He erased me in his mind. And that meant he'd never see what was coming. When Ethan finished talking, there was no rage left in me. No shock. No grief. Just a clean, surgical clarity, like someone had wiped a fogged mirror, and suddenly I could see the full shape of the man sitting across from me. He believed every word he'd said. He believed I was small, replaceable, an obstacle that needed to be dismantled with precision. And that belief was the exact weakness I needed. I stood, calm enough that he finally looked unsure. This conversation, I said, never should have happened in your office. He frowned. Meaning what? I held up my phone. The screen was dark, but he knew. His expression flickered, only for half a second, but enough. You recorded me. His voice was low, furious. That's illegal in Arizona's a one-party consent state, I said, and I'm the one party. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I slipped the phone into my bag. Thank you for admitting everything. You saved me weeks. Then I walked out. The real work began immediately. I drove straight to a law firm in Scottsdale a former coworker had recommended years ago. I played the recording, showed the financial documents, the draft statement he'd written, the mysterious transfers, everything. The attorney didn't interrupt once. When the audio ended, he leaned back, shock flickering across his face before he locked back into professionalism. You have him, he said, everywhere that matters. We drafted boundary orders, asset freezes, petitions that forced immediate disclosure of accounts. He connected me with a corporate attorney who specialized in internal leaks. She listened to Ethan's recorded admissions twice, then said, if his firm hears this before he talks, they'll protect you. They'll crucify him. It was late by the time I left their office, but my steps felt different, measured, strong, rooted. I wasn't running anymore. I was advancing. The next morning, I sent everything to Ethan's company's compliance department, anonymously, but with enough detail that they knew exactly which employee to investigate. His admissions about leaked information, his plan to blame me, his coordinated efforts with Rachel, all of it. Within hours, chaos detonated. I heard about it first from Liam. He's been pulled into an emergency meeting. They're not telling him why yet. Then another message minutes later. Rachel's husband just got notified too. She's panicking. By noon, Ethan called me. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was tight, almost strangled. We need to talk. Things are getting twisted. Call me back. I didn't. 2 hours later, I got an email from the firm's HR legal division requesting a statement. They had already suspended him pending investigation. Rachel's husband had reportedly demanded separation. The circle he'd curated so carefully was turning inward, closing around him like a trap. Every safeguard he'd built, His reputation, his alliances, his narrative was collapsing in real time. And he had handed me the match. That evening, I filed for divorce with the full backing of the Scottsdale firm. The petition detailed financial misconduct, infidelity, reputational sabotage, and intentional emotional harm. It included the recordings, the email trails, the draft statement he'd written accusing me of instability. Within the hour, a temporary restraining order was approved, financial and personal. For the first time in years, I felt my lungs fully expand. Ethan tried again that night, a text. "You don't understand what you've done." I looked at the message until the screen dimmed. Then I finally wrote back. "I understand exactly." Weeks passed. The investigation gutted him. He was terminated for cause, which meant his severance evaporated. Rachel turned on him to save herself and provided emails he'd thought he deleted. His professional reputation burned out across Phoenix in less than a month. And our divorce. The court granted me everything the law allowed, and then some. He lost the house. Access to accounts. Every inch of ground he tried to take from me, the court handed back with interest. I moved into a small rental in Tempe with light that poured through the windows every morning. The first night there, I slept without waking once. I wasn't healed. Healing would take longer, but I was free. And the freedom was real, heavy, grounding. Something I earned piece by refusing to let him define my ending. Sometimes, late at night, I replay one moment from his office. The slight flicker in his eyes when he realized I had recorded him. When the man who thought he controlled every outcome saw the first crack. That was the moment he lost.